So here's an obvious question I don't think any fans of wrestling, casual, hardcore, would want to ask. Because there's no doubt when people like Alex Hicks and Jason Solomon and JD from NY206, it's no secret when they come out and say, hey, wrestling needs companies like AEW. They need them to thrive. They need them to exist. They need them to be there for other men and women who want to continue doing what they love doing, to have a place to go and hone, if not truly master their craft in the ring, whether as, competitors or storytellers or whatever. There's no doubt people will tell you that, and it's true. Wrestling or any sport, period, sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it, they need an alternative. They need a yin to the yang and vice versa. But then comes the ultimate question. What happens when that yin disappears? What happens when that alternative changes for the worst? And mostly what happens when that alternative's only outsourced becomes the new outsourced for the opposition. What happens? You see, those are questions that fans have to ask themselves and wonder about. Because the biggest question that overtakes all of them is what happens to that alternative, that, rival, if you will, that's trying to provide another platform for others to compete at. What happens when it's put into a situation to where everything that made it what it was is suddenly taken away, and they have no other choice but to potentially shutter its doors? In other words, close up shop. Whether it's for an indefinite amount of time to the point that they need to use the time off to rebuild, or it gets to a point to where they have to basically shutter their doors and say, we tried, we had success, and ultimately we failed because we let our success go to our head. What happens? What happens to that, overall? And again, these questions, along with, this major question, is basically something that nobody wants to ask about when it comes to AEW. Because AEW right now is in a very unique situation. We just found out, according to just Alex, who read this off Kenny Omega's social media page, that Kenny Omega is going to be out indefinitely due to injury. It's a medical issue we don't know much about. What's funny is Sean Ross Sapp and Mike Johnson of Fightful and PW Insider haven't really said anything on the matter just yet. I'm sure they will later on once they get more detail. But I can almost be certain on one thing. There's a lot of fans, there's a lot of wrestling fans out there, AEW fans, diehards, if you will, that will look at what Kenny is saying, see that no other reliable source is saying anything, and they'll probably come to the conclusion of, we don't know if this is true, guys. We don't know if this is true. Kenny might just be saying that because he might be the devil, the man behind the devil mask. You never know. You never know. You never know. They'll come to that conclusion. They'll come to that conclusion, if you will, that, this is all work. That this is just Kenny biding time before he comes back at World's End, reveals himself to be behind the devil mask, and the Elite goes back to being the top heel faction in the company that's named after them. That's something that fans will look at. But, if it's coming directly from Omega himself, sometimes you have to look at that, as legit, as very real, if you kind of see what I'm saying. Like I said, as you can kind of see what I'm saying, because if it comes from anybody else, whether they're reliable or not so reliable, you kind of question it, if you will. You kind of question whether or not there's truth to it. But if it's coming directly from the person themselves, and they show a photo of themselves being in the hospital, on a bed, on a hospital bed, having to be taken care of, I think you might have to take, that with, pretty much, a whole bowl's worth of truthfulness. That, if that makes any sense, in what I just said. But yeah, Kenny Omega basically said, look, I'm out, guys. I am out indefinitely. I am here in a hospital bed, so I'm pretty much, out of the equation for a while. What that does for the World Tag Team title match at World's End is anybody's guess. We can assume they're going to have to rush the Young Bucks back to get the title match, to take the place of Omega, or Adam Page is going to have to be rushed in to team up with Jericho, or maybe Sammy Guevara. Maybe Sammy Guevara comes back as a babyface, pretty much, makes up the storyline of, hey, I'm a father now, and, I've realized that I can't make the wrong decisions. Now I know what it's like to be with a real family, not, somebody that just wants me there to take somebody out, It's going to really make things a little interesting going into World's End. But yeah, there are going to be fans, though, like I said, they're going to look at what Kenny said, look at the picture and be like, nah, he's not really injured. He's working us. It's going to be revealed. He's the devil, People, I guarantee you, people are already assuming that. But, when you look at that, though, from a legitimate standpoint, coming directly from the source himself, when you look at that and, you look at all the other, problems that's been plaguing AEW, ever since the firing of CM Punk, and more so than that, even before then. And then on top of that, you look at the potential, probably stronger than it's ever been, more legitimate than it's ever been, that Warner Bros. Discovery and David Zaslav might consider favoring WWE Monday Night Raw over AEW Dynamite and Collision and Rampage to put on one of their networks. Yeah, a lot of those questions that I mentioned at the beginning start to really, come to the surface. They really start coming to the surface, and they make you, ponder and wonder, what the future holds. Like, what would happen if AEW has to basically, shut down for good? What happens to all these contracts that they have signed talent to, and potentially going to sign future talent to? What happens? Do these talents still remain under contract and Tony Khan and his family have to just pay them to sit at home? Or basically do they get freed from their contracts? Do their contracts become null and void and maybe they head to Impact, maybe they head to Japan, maybe they head back to WWE, who knows? This is something that, fans have to really consider. Now, I'm not wishing death on AEW, no. Because like I said at the beginning, I'm in total agreement. Wrestling, just like any sports entertainment, entity, or just like any combat sport entity, they need an alternative to the Prime, is what they need. They need the alternative, to the Prime. WWE is the prime of pro wrestling and sports entertainment right now. So you need that clear-cut alternative that can rival them, beat for beat, or at least try to, and AEW fills that void. Impact Wrestling, TNA, right now does not fill that void. I mean, 2024 might be the year that they do it, or start to do it, but right now AEW is the only one on a bigger platform that's able to pretty much feel it, pretty much do what WCW once did, or at least try to. Impact TNA right now being on Access TV is not going to do it. It's not going to do it. But you have other promotions too that some might say, well, they could be the alternative. Not precisely. New Japan could be the alternative, yes. But again, they're on Access TV. They're on Access TV, just like, Impact Wrestling, and even though they're a big company, and everybody likes working with them or wants to go work for them, it's not at that level yet. Even though it's been around since the early 70s, it's not at that level that it needs to be. I mean, yes, there have been times where it's peaked at the point that many would consider it to be the true number one wrestling, pro wrestling sports entertainment entity in the world. But now it's gotten to a point to where it's in the top 5, but it's either number 3 or number 4 in the eyes of a lot of fans. And that's a fact. That's a fact. It might just be at number 4, right under Impact and AEW. Ring of Honor is not even in the top 15 in the eyes of a lot of folks. And the only one that would round out that top 5, would be MLW and potentially AAA. And that's it. But, again, they're not at that level, that AEW is at to really, truly compete with WWE and be that alternative, be that, that outsource outside of WWE, that allows people to go and apply the craft elsewhere, or master the craft and show the world that they either still have it or show the world what they can do and get themselves on the map, or finally establish themselves as the main eventers that they feel, they feel and believe they are. You don't have that clear-cut alternative outside of AEW, when it comes to WWE. WWE is the prime institute everybody wants to get, wants to be enrolled in, pretty much. AEW is the alternative if you've got no other place to go. The other main alternative, that is. So again, the question's going to be, what happens when that main alternative gets to a point to where it's not going to be around? It's not going to be available. It's not going to have its doors open. What's going to happen if you get to that point? What's going to happen with all those people you've enrolled into your institution, and now you have to basically give them back their money. You have to refund them. Or you got to let them transfer to someplace else. It's like, what do you do? What do you do when it comes to all that? How do you handle that? And this is something that a lot of fans have to really consider. Again, I'm not wishing for AEW to go out of business. I want them to thrive. I want them to pull a WCW I want them to pull a WCW and literally out of nowhere, put WWE on their heels. Basically show WWE, hey, you ain't the only game in town anymore. We're selling out stadiums. We're selling out venues. You ain't the only game in town anymore. We got people wanting to come here. I'm hoping they do something like that. I'm hoping they hit that moment. They get that lightning in a bottle that they need. But right now they don't have that. They don't have that lightning in a bottle. They almost did. They briefly did when they got CM Punk. But guess what? They didn't know, mostly Tony Khan did not know how to control him. Tony Khan is nothing. Tony Khan proved when CM Punk showed up, more so than anything else, that he's nothing more than a fan, role playing as a boss. And that's all he's doing. That's all he's doing. And yeah, he did the right thing by stepping up and firing CM Punk because of what happened at All In. But you really have to ask yourself, how much of that was really Tony? How much do you hold on. Okay, I was trying to think about what I was going to say. Almost got tongue-tied. But anyway, you have to ask yourself, how much of that was really Tony Khan wanting to do that? Do you think Tony Khan wanted to stand in front of that camera and say he has to fire Phil Brooks? Do you think he wanted to do that? No. He didn't want to do that, but he was made to. He was suggested to by the committee. And I think in a way, he probably asked other people about advice. He probably said, hey, I got this advice from Bryan Danielson and the committee to potentially release, Phil Brooks from his contract. Should I do it and everything? He probably went around after he got that advice and asked everybody else, do you think it's the smart thing to do? And I guarantee you some of the people that he talked to were either, higher ups on his roster, elite, I wouldn't say the elite, but basically elitists on the roster, basically like his potential main event stars, men and women. He probably asked, hey, is this, hey, you think this is a good idea because they're suggesting I do it. And maybe some of them, including some of the agents that used to be in-ring competitors, are probably telling them, hey, if you don't want to lose the rest of the locker room, dude, it's probably the best, it's probably the only solution. As much as we could tell you don't want to do it, it's probably the best solution. And that's exactly what happened. He probably went around after Danielson and the committee said, hey, this is the solution we feel is the best, direction to go in, and, Tony Khan probably went to others afterwards, told them about the solution he was given, and they probably advised him, hey, it's probably best you do it. And there you go. Because you can't tell me that once he was given that directly from Bryan Danielson, in the committee of, hey, this is what we suggest, that needs to be done, to kind of, get things back to normal behind the scenes here, you can't tell me Tony Khan did not want to hear that. You can't tell me that Tony Khan was not probably considering, no, I'm not going to fire him and just, let things go as they were. You can't tell me he wasn't considering not firing him, because I guarantee you he was, in my opinion, and he probably just went around and asked for further advice after he got that solution given to him. But still, you take a look at, that CM Punk situation, you take a look at that, and like I said, you add that to the equation of everything that's just not been, going their way, just not been going their way. And it's like, and you got, like I said, you got to start asking these questions like, is the end, are we close to the end of this company? Was this company just a niche company out there, for the hardcore fans to get it out of the system, to have a major wrestling promotion opposite of WWE, to get the hardcore loving of pro wrestling out of their system, and then maybe eventually be like, okay, we got it out of our system, now we'll just go to WWE and hopefully, they'll give us what we want to. You have to wonder if you're a fan, hardcore or casual, you have to wonder if the end is near. You have to wonder that, because again, like I said, I want them to succeed. I want them to succeed and be that alternative, be the opposition we all know they can be. Grab that lightning in a bottle once again. Like I was saying. Because again, like I mentioned, they captured it with CM Punk, and then of course we all know what happened. But hopefully they can capture it again, and this time contain it and not let it go. Because if they can do that in 2024, the sky's the limit for them. The sky is the limit. They just got to come up with the right directional path to go down. And that's why I said in my previous video, World's End, the final pay-per-view of the year. The pay-per-view, 2 days, I think, what was it? 2 days or a day before New Year's Eve? 2 days before New Year's Eve. That's the pay-per-view. That is the event. I think it's the day before New Year's Eve, right? That's the event that they need to utilize to basically send a message to not just WWE, but to everybody in pro wrestling and sports entertainment that 2024 is going to be the comeback year, and that's going to be the year that they show the world they are to be taken seriously, and they have the talent and the stories and the characters to prove it. That's why I said, I didn't say that. Well, I did say that basically in the video and everything, in the audio video, but on screen video. But yeah, that's what World's End needs to be for them. At the end of this month, it needs to be, it needs to be their way of saying 2020. Their way of saying, hey, we're going into 2024 on a high note, and it's going to be our year because we have the talent, we have the stories, we have the characters, we have the whole total package. This is going to be our year. 2024 is going to be our year. And they need to start it out by ending the last pay-per-view of the year and ending 2023 for them on a high note. They need to do that. They need to do that at World's End. Because if they don't and they fall flat on their face, they'll give us some good in-ring action, don't get me wrong. But if they don't do what I said outside of the great in-ring action, they're going to fall flat on their face, and they're going to have no one but themselves to blame. They're going to have no one but themselves to blame, and people are going to start wondering if the 5-year anniversary of AEW's existence could be their last. They're going to wonder if, this company's only meant to last 5 years, and then after World's End next year, if there is another World's End, or after All In next year, you have to wonder if that's when they'll be like, okay, we're done. AEW is going to cease to be, we're going to go out of business. We're going to sell off the contracts. We're going to let people go wherever they want now because, hey, we spent the last half decade proving to the world that not only can you have an alternative, but I, Tony Khan, as a fan, proved that we fans could do just as good a job, if not better, than those that have been in the business a long time. Is that what we're leading towards? Is that what 2024 will be? Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Which again goes back to my video I did. They have to use World's End as their way of saying 2024 is going to be our year. That's what they got to do. That's what they got to do. Because if not, 2024 could be their year, but it could be their last year if they're not careful. Because they still need to get a TV deal. They need to either, stay on Max. They either have to, I wouldn't say stay on Max, but they need to stay with the WBD and accept any direction they're going to go in. Like I said in a previous audio video, they might have to accept, going to Discovery. Or they may have to, mostly Tony Khan, may have to swallow his pride and tell his roster, hey, we can't take shots at WWE anymore because we're sharing the same airspace with them now. Just to remain on TBS and TNT. He might have to do that. He might have to do that just to remain on those higher up networks of the WBD family of networks. He may have to do that, to stay on TBS, to stay on TNT, and potentially get a Max deal. But, we'll have to see. We'll have to see in everything. But, yeah, right now, the position they are in, with the viewership going down, the attendance is not doing well, outside of the pay-per-views, the attendance not doing well and all that, it really makes you wonder if, the end is near. If the 5-year anniversary of AEW could be their last. Or if 2024 will be the year they bounce back and show that they are a true alternative. They are the AEW that we've come to know and love and support. Because if not, every question I mentioned at the beginning of this audio vid, those are questions you now have to wonder. You have to wonder that with everything going on with them, is the end near? Could they be shuttering their doors soon? Or will they be able to bounce back? And then you have to ask yourself, what about all these contracted talents? What happens there? Do you release them? Do you pay them to sit at home for the duration of the contract? Do you release them and let them go explore other options elsewhere, like Japan, AAA, Impact TNA, MLW, Rev Pro, CMLL, back to WWE, House of Glory? You have to wonder. You have to wonder. NWA, you have to wonder. You have to wonder what will happen to them if AEW doesn't bounce back. You got to wonder that. These are questions you have to think about. You have to consider and think about. And once again, in closing, let me say this. I do not want AEW to go out of business. I want AEW to thrive. I want it to survive. I want it to keep going. I want it to basically, as I mentioned earlier, pull a WCW in 1996 and give WWE a run for their money. I want them to do that. And heck, if the devil storyline that they got going, if the revelation of who's behind that mask at World's End, is done properly, that could be the key they need. That could be the catalyst they need to march into 2024 on a high note and say, hey, we're here to stay, and we are here to be the true alternative to WWE, and we're going to do what we should have done at the beginning, and we're going to pack arenas, with fans, attendance-wise, we're going to sell out venues, and we're going to do things the right way. We're going to start focusing on stories, characters, along with the in-ring action. To me, that's the only way they're going to walk in to 2024 on a high note, is if they execute the revelation of who's behind the devil mask, perfectly. Because if they don't, and it turns out to be somebody else that nobody else is expecting, because there are a lot of names, people, strong candidates, a lot of people are looking at as to who could be behind that mask or behind what's going on. But again, if you go and do it and it falls flat on its face, then 2024 is going to be a very rough year. And a lot of people will probably look at 2024, the 5-year anniversary of AEW, as potentially being its last, because they could be losing their TV deal, they could be thrown off the family of networks of WBD, or they could end up being put onto on the Discovery Channel, in favor of WWE taking over TBS and TNT. You never know. But again, I don't want them to go out of business. I want them to stay around. I do. Because every sports entertainment genre, every pro sports needs an alternative. And NFL is always going to need an XFL and a USFL. An MLB, is always going to need the minor leagues or the World Baseball Classics. The NBA is always going to need the WNBA or the CBA or whatever they have out there as an alternative. The NHL is going to always need things like the AHL, and so on and so forth. The NCAA FBS during football season is always going to need an FCS. You're always going to need those alternatives. You're always going to need those other places to go to. A Harvard is always going to need a Yale, and vice versa. A Penn is always going to need a Cornell. A Stanford is always going to need a Cal. A Kansas is always going to need a Kansas State. A Texas is always going to need a Texas A&M, and a Texas is always going to need an Oklahoma, and an Oklahoma is always going to need an Oklahoma State. You're always going to need alternatives. You're always going to need someone to make you better. And that's what everybody, including myself, wants AEW to be. But there's no denying that the way things are structured right now, Kenny being out indefinitely for who knows how long, it's like, you have to start asking yourself these questions that I asked at the beginning. And again, I want them to succeed. I do. But you seriously have to now start asking yourself, could the end be near? Could it be near? Let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment if you like. Live chat during the premiere. And I'll talk to you later. But yeah, consider asking yourself these questions. Could the end be near?